Hi everyone, Janine here from the VA Finishing School, and today I'm going to talk about common invoicing mistakes we make as virtual assistants and how to avoid them. So over the last couple of days, I've been receiving a lot of messages and emails from virtual assistants saying they've done this work for this client, they've sent out invoices, and the clients are simply not paying. What must they do? So if you're joining me live, please comment below. Hi Brenda Lee, please comment below and say hi and tell me about any invoicing situations that you've had with clients where you either haven't been paid or you were paid late. So I'm going to go through 5 top or common invoicing mistakes that we make as virtual assistants in our own businesses, and then I'm going to go through how we can avoid them. So number 1 is probably a no-brainer, and you're probably going to think, how on earth does this happen? But believe me, it happens. So number 1, forgetting to invoice. You won't believe how many freelancers and virtual assistants forget to invoice. They actually forget to send invoices to clients. So if you don't send an invoice and if you forget to invoice the client when you've done the work, how can you expect them to pay you? The client is not going to remind you to send you the invoice, and sometimes they do, but it's very rare. So if you forget to send the invoice to the client, how is the client going to know to pay you, right? So number 2, the common invoicing mistakes we make is not sending out invoices on time. So this goes sort of hand in hand with point number 1, forgetting to invoice. Point number 2, not sending invoices out on time. So this happens quite a lot because we get busy and many of us don't have automated systems. So we rely on our memories to remind us to send or to remember to send out invoices, and sometimes we don't send it out on time. So say, for example, you did a job for a client at the beginning of the month, then the whole month you don't send out the invoice, and all of a sudden it hits you, you haven't invoiced this client, and then 30 days later you send an invoice to the client. Well, no wonder the client doesn't want to pay the invoice because it's 30 days late, right? So it's absolutely paramount that you send your invoices out on time. Now, the 3rd common invoicing mistake that we make as virtual assistants is that we don't follow up on invoices. And this is probably the most common mistake we make. We send out an invoice and then we forget about it. So when you send out an invoice, you should have a payment date, a due date set on your invoice, and you need to follow up on payment on that due date. Send out a reminder, follow up on that payment to make sure that you get paid. The 4th common invoicing mistake we make as virtual assistants is we make mistakes on our invoices. We don't put the right invoice number, we don't put the right dates. Sometimes we have typing errors, sometimes we underbill, we overbill, we make mistakes with the pricing. And this is simply not acceptable. And again, no wonder clients don't want to pay invoices with mistakes, right? Think about yourself. Would you pay an invoice where you make mistakes, or if you receive an invoice full of mistakes, will you pay that invoice? Will you be happy to pay that invoice? So you have to make sure that your invoices are 100% free of error before you send it out. Check, 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 right? Now, the 5th common invoicing mistake we make is that we don't charge late fees on payments. So this goes hand in hand with not following up on not following up on outstanding invoices. So if you send out an invoice and you just don't hear anything back from the client doesn't pay your invoice, and you don't have any late fee policy either in your contract or specified on your invoice, clients are going to simply ignore your invoices. So you need to actually specify on your invoice and stipulate there that you will be charging late fees for non-payments or late payments of your invoices. Now, let's look at ways how we can tie this all together and avoid these 5 common mistakes. So number 1 is to use a automation system. Have your processes and systems and processes in place, right? This is why I keep saying to you guys, have your systems and your procedures and your processes in place before you actually accept the client. Before you start working with the client, have everything in place. Have your invoices, your contracts, your terms and conditions, your whole process. How is it going to work? What are you going to send out first, second, third, fourth? Have it all mapped out, have it all created, have it all automated. And how do you automate it? You use a automation system or a CRM system. I myself use 17 Hats. Now, some people like it, some people don't, and there are various other ones to use. To name but a few, you can use QuickBooks, Sage, FreshBooks, Wave, and there are tons and tons of other ones that you can use. So do a little research. Find a CRM system that works for you. Ask in Facebook groups where other virtual assistants hang out. Ask them, what CRM system do you use? What automation system do you use? And what do you like and what don't you like about it? And figure it out for yourself, okay? Alternatively, if you choose not to use a CRM system, you need to then make sure that you add these reminders and dates to your calendar so that you can be reminded when to send the invoice, when to follow up with the invoice. And this is for very, very new virtual assistants. When you're working on a manual system, when you send out or when it's time to invoice the client, you have to have that date on your calendar when it's time to send the invoice. So you make sure that you send the invoice, you make sure that you follow up, and you make sure that you receipt the payment. All right, so have a little checklist for yourself, add those dates to the calendar, or invest a little bit in a CRM system, in an automation system. Now, another way to avoid non-payments of invoices is to actually have a very solid and firm contract in place with clear terms and conditions. And what I mean by a solid contract, not a contract that's sort of like a broad overall contract. No, it has to be specific to that client, specific to the work that the client contracted you to do for them. And your payment terms have to be included in the contract, right? The terms and conditions have to be crystal clear so that there's no room for error, for misunderstanding, and for misinterpretation. Hi, Queen. Thank you for joining us. If anybody is watching live, please drop comments in the comment section. Talk to me. Tell me about invoicing mistakes you've made, or tell me about incidents with clients where either they've not paid your invoice, paid it late, or just simply not paid your invoice, and how you overcame that obstacle. So it's very, very important, guys, to have a solid contract in place, crystal clear contract with crystal clear terms and conditions, signed by the client, signed by you before you start the work. Now, another way to ensure that invoices get paid is actually to invoice before you hand over any work, or invoice before you actually do any work. Now, in my own virtual assistant business, I used to invoice on retainer. So I invoice at the beginning of the month for the month. I invoice and then I actually do the work. I don't do the work and then invoice afterwards because unfortunately it is common that clients don't pay invoices after the fact, right? And especially because we're dealing with clients online, it's very difficult for us to actually enforce the law and get our payment. So if you have a clear payment policy in place, written into your contract, part of your terms and conditions, signed by the client, signed by you, that says full payment is required prior to commencement of work. If you have something like that, be sure to have it checked with an attorney to make sure that your wording is actually lawful and legal. But if you have something like that where you specify that you need full payment before you actually do the work, and then you send the invoice and you make sure that you get the payment, then you should have no problem getting your money from the client. Then here is a little interesting fact for you guys. According to Forbes, invoices with branding, so if you actually brand your invoice with your logo, your colors, add your website address maybe, it has a 3 times higher, or it's 3 times more likely to get paid than those who are simply just, you know, a straightforward black and white invoice, types up on a Google document, no branding, no nothing, just a copy paste template. Now, in my 30+ template swipe files and checklists pack that I sell in the VA Finishing School store, in the online store, I actually have a few contract examples. I have a few invoices, and these are actually templates that I created in my own virtual assistant business that I use over and over, and I actually have them checked with attorneys, and they are lawful and the terminology is correct. So if you buy that, all you have to do is personalize it, and then you already have a part of your systems and your processes sorted out. So you definitely want to get your templates set up. You definitely want to get your emails templates drawn up, your invoice templates, your contract templates, and then you also want to look at getting an automation system. Or if you're going to do it manually, you need to have a checklist, and it needs to be a routine that when you create a contract, you get the contract back from the client, you send the invoice, make sure you get the payment before you actually do the work. So those are just 5 very common mistakes that we make, invoicing mistakes that we make as virtual assistants, plus some great tips on how to avoid these mistakes. All right, so thank you guys for joining me today, and I'll see you back in the group.